So it's kind of been a good start. I think it's been helpful for us as well to be able to articulate more publicly what we've been working on and thinking of over the past sort of 12 to 18 months as we bring HTA Policy Futures to kind of near launch. We've talked a little bit about what it is, the HTA lens, and we'll have many, many more discussions around all of this. And I think as we said in the off bit, we've been obsessed a little bit with trying to define it and understand it, but actually we're quite relaxed about it because, as you say, Gene, we don't want to put it in a box. It's organic and it's evolving, but it's directional. We kind of know our lane, but we don't need to decide everything, describe it. We will keep it open, and we need to describe it enough that people want to get involved, and then we can keep having the discussion. So all of that is good. But another question that we get all the time is, well, what is it that you're actually going to do? So it's this sort of thing about the theory of change. So how do we discuss and align and get consensus, and then how do we translate that into theory of action? So what are we actually kind of going to do? And we've thought long and hard about this, and of course we don't want to be a talking shop. We don't want to throw spaghetti at the wall. We don't want to have an annual theme and then move on to some other theme, and there's no sort of aggregation of stuff. We want to approach this completely differently. So we're going to take a 5-year window and say, okay, this is our starting point. This is the time frame in which we want to work in a very, very focused way. We're going to implement academic rigor. We're going to have consistent, recognizable sort of facilitation across everything we do. So whether you're leading on something or you're leading on something, more or less, despite our individual styles, it's going to be consistent. We'll move everybody in the same direction. And then as I said, we've got our methods and all this stuff. And then it's around saying, okay, how do you get the content? And what do you do with the content? So the idea is that we have designed a portfolio of initiatives that we think all fit together like hand in glove and are logical. It's like our project wheel, which you guys have seen. It's still been baked a bit, but again, we're not obsessed about having it completely baked because we want to co-bake it. But we need a starting point, and we think we've got that, and we can see logically how we'd apply the methods and how each one would fit together and how each one would allow us to continue the thematic discussions that would flow from our inaugural summit, which will happen in April this year now, because we're in January 2026. So this discussion a little bit is just around, as we work towards that summit, what does it look like and kind of what are we trying to do? It's going to be over 2 days in Edinburgh. Guaranteed the weather, of course. It's got an amazing climate. It's often compared to San Diego, Southern California. The average is 73 degrees.
Unfavourably, I would imagine.
And there's lots of great social programs. The hotel is very close to the airport, and all of that's going to be really, really good. And we're going to have it in Edinburgh every year because I think it then becomes synonymous with the same hotel, the same environment, and it sort of builds that organisational memory and becomes recognisable and sort of consistent. It's going to be invite only, and I know people have pushed back on that because we want to make sure that there is the right people in the room that's reflective of as many of the stakeholder groups in the system as possible, but there's a critical mass of each group, so it's not just an individual's opinion, there's a group of opinions. So it's going to be a small and intimate group, and we hope that if we do a good job, at least 80% of that group will come back next year and each year. So you're kind of building almost a movement, a critical mass of like-minded individuals with some attrition and some new entrants, but more or less. And it's not like what we were speaking about earlier on around, some of the changes you see in organizations, and if too many people rotate and leave at the same time, there's risks attached to that. You lose the organizational memory and the sort of evolution of the discussion. So we want to try and keep it as a relatively small and intimate and accessible group that's representative of all the different stakeholders, and hopefully build some chemistry and some relationships and move through that 5-year period as a group. So that's the kind of first construct. So before we get into the agenda, just do you have any reflections on just that broad sort of principle about putting a sort of strategic portfolio of synergistic projects together and using the inaugural summit as a means to try and have a really in-depth from policy to research and back again discussion to give us the content that would allow us to prioritize some themes to deliver within the Policy Futures construct. So, Carol, do you want to jump in?
I think that having an invite-only audience has some advantages. I think it also has some disadvantages in that you are the same people every year doing the same thing. So if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. So I think, you need some flexibility in terms of bringing people with particular skills or knowledge or something to facilitate discussion on the topics. I think having a clear suite of activities that you can implement that sits under the HTA Policy Futures is good, and I think that should be part of the discussion at your inaugural summit, is how do we use those for the topics that you're raising, so that you, in your individual sessions, you actually come out not just with we think this is an important topic, but we think it needs to be tested by this methodology or something like that. So that, I'm very conscious of the fact that the people supporting this initiative are quite limited in number, so that the more we can support them by getting input into those sorts of things from the participants would be really helpful. And finally, I think the idea of the same people holding your feet to the fire next year is a useful way to ensure that things do happen.
I think there is something to be said for just getting that balance right, that you have enough people in the room that you get the diversity and the challenge and the innovation in thinking, but not so many that it becomes uncontrollable and you can't actually do anything. It's a bit like, some people often give Scotland a hard time, but they say, hey, one of the good things about Scotland is that from a health system perspective is that it's big enough that you can do something, but not so big you can't do anything. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is just try and get that critical mass of people, like a good kind of fighting weight that allows us to be robust and credible, but actually get stuff done.
A couple of thoughts come to mind, and there's always, always hard choices to be made when you're starting an endeavour like this. How big does it need to be to have the mass it needs, without getting so big that nothing comes out? It seems to me that a summit type of approach to kick things off seems like a reasonable way of doing it. I think for me the two key things will be, the two tests will be, are we talking about things that the participants want to talk about? And from that, are we then doing things that the participants want to see done?
Or be part of.
And is there a way of involving them in that subsequent production or development of the topic? So finding some way to get the agenda of the summit very much imprinted from the things that are keeping people up at night that are coming to the summit, I think is really crucial. But more importantly, having some structure, as you've described afterwards, but of moving those into vehicles then for development becomes really, really crucial. And that's always tricky, because it's not just about, writing a report of the summit, is it? It's really about getting to grips with some of those topics and taking them, so we're talking about policy, taking them to a place where you can feel that the stakeholders, the participants at the summit and the wider stakeholders can take that output and do something with it. Yeah. So I'm not sure we've quite cracked that bit yet. I'm hoping the summit will help us with that, because we're going to have some great minds there. Yeah.
Can I just add, I think one of the other kind of important things is that if you have people from the summit involved in taking these things forward, that it's not like free for all, because people are not always competent in the areas they think they're competent. So,
What are you looking at me like that for?
I think you have to kind of be conscious of what is going to be done and whether the people who might stand up and volunteer actually have the skills and expertise and time to do it. So I think there's going to be some management, Eric, of kind of how you move things forward from the summit that will just take a bit of thought.
And how many of them? So that you'd use the word prioritisation. So some method approach to prioritisation of the topics that are discussed and the things that come out of it become quite important. Not to lose the rest of the agenda. So keep the agenda very present, front of mind, but there can only be a few things that can be tackled. Yeah. And of course the five-year time horizon becomes quite interesting, because that has, again, both strengths and weaknesses, because things are changing so quickly that I'm not sure I can predict that in a year's time.
But I think it's about having that agility. Like all strategic plans now, they're agile, you know, because you can't predict the future. But I think giving some timeline, even arbitrary, I think is important. But I mean, you raised lots of good points, and somebody many moons ago, much smarter than me, introduced me to this concept of a managed democracy, where it's like a democracy, but you've got to manage it because you have to get things done. It's not a club, you know, you've got to get things done. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is to say, okay, you know, we want everybody to come in and co-create, but we're going to have the facilitation and the guardrails to make sure that it all moves forward and it's not just talking shop, and then we'll build a team that has the skills to implement and deliver on it, which is really, really important. And but I think just a kind of couple of things around, we want to try and have a run-in. So we've been around long enough to know we've had so many discussions around, there are themes that already emerge. You wouldn't need a crystal ball to understand exactly what's going to come up in, because that's our job in our careers and what we've done. We've tried to understand. So I think our starting point will be, I think, quite close to, and that's having the steering group and the thought leadership. We've already had a lot of that kind of input. But I think also, and a lot of what we're doing is actually being shaped by that collective discussion that we've had over many years. But if time allows, we're going to have a few run-in exercises into the agenda.
That's before the summit starts.
Yeah, so we'll do polls and different things. We even thought about doing some pre-prioritization exercises to kind of do it, and we've had various helpful pieces of comment around that. But what I would say is that we're limited in time, and we're also self-funding this at the moment, although we are speaking to a number of vendors and pharma companies and philanthropists that are all interested in supporting us, and we need the support. But we have to be constrained ourselves around what's possible, and everything that you're saying is that we're trying to do it and do it well. So there will be a run-in to it, and there are points in the agenda where I think on day one and day two, where we will reflect on some poll results. We've also introduced this thing called, I think it's Speaker's Corner, I think we've called it, which just, because otherwise it's quite methodological, the agenda, because it's business. We want to get the job done, and we want to take us through in a methodological way from start to finish so we get the content. But there's also Speaker's Corner where people can stand up and get 5 minutes and they just get stuff off their chest. It's all important content, and it will be captured and it will be reflected and included in the report. So the idea is, and it's not, I mean, Carol and I collaborate on something called Frontiers, which is, it's a similar concept where we have this big deep dive at the beginning, and it's hard, but then we have this inaugural report, and in that report we sort of capture everything in the entire ecosystem, and it's therapy area specific. And then we have project match and prioritization exercises that the groups lead on that gives us a short list of key projects. And then we use these key projects to do research, or we come back at different time points in the year and we do a deeper dive on the area that's been prioritized. And it works really well. So it's a similar kind of concept.
One of the things with that, just since you've mentioned it, and that I've experienced only in that vehicle, is the huge influence and participation of the audience themselves at the summit, at the meeting, in driving both the conversation, but definitely the content. And it's something that I think is if we can capture that in the summit, it would be really, really helpful, because it was extremely powerful. Things being expressed in ways that no panelist would do, because they're a panelist. When you're a panelist, you're a little bit more formal in the way you're saying things. It's really very powerful.
And it's an important kind of concept, and it's about keeping it the right size. So what we want to do is not have death by PowerPoint. So the agenda's not dominated by plenaries. Each session is a logical go from the demand side to the supply side and back again, basically. And it will be predominantly panel discussions. And you know, we've all been on panels, and they get going and then they finish, right? It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. Or they ask us each to give 3 5-minute talks, and it's half an hour later, and then it's so frustrating. And there's no value in it, or there's not as much value. So we don't want to do that. So each session will essentially have a 5-minute problem and opportunity statement, and then it'll be between a 60 and 90-minute panel discussion. And the panels, more or less, will be representative of the majority of the stakeholders with optimized maximum audience participation. So the idea is that while the panel is on the stage, it isn't the audience listening to the panel, as it typically is. That the audience is an extension of the panel, and the panel is an extension of the audience. And the facilitation style will be, you guys will probably be facilitators, you'll be right in the middle, because the room setup will be a circle. So you'll be in the middle, and you will be facilitating and involving the audience as much as you are the panel. So, and the idea is that whatever the number is, 80% of the audience will also be on 1 or 2 panels. So it will be organic, if that's the right word. It will be inclusive. It will be, you know, we'll all just move in a circular motion to stimulate that audience participation, that everybody gets the chance to, you know, and not feel rushed on a panel, you know, because you're like really concerned about taking up time, and you're looking at the clock and think, I've got 5 minutes to go, and there's 10 people that have got 10 things to say. We don't want to do that. And because it's not a one and done, these discussions will continue, they'll be captured, and they'll continue within the construct of HTA Policy Futures. It takes the pressure off a little bit, because we'll have thematic discussion forums and webinars and things like this.
That was going to be my next thought as I was listening to you. How do we get, I'm getting a real feel, a picture in my head of the way the summit will work. It sounds very exciting, quite daunting to say if you're going to have to facilitate. But how do you move from that to the stuff, which is the action, which is the output?
So this is where the methods and facilitation comes in. And I know we have to do some sessions on that, is because let's say we have 3 or 4 facilitators sharing the load. We're all driven by a goal to take the discussion in a stepwise way from demand to supply and back again. So we can't do it individually with different, you know, it's all synergistic in many ways. And the whole idea is that each panel will have a methodological approach, which will be what's the problem for which we think we need a solution, or what is the opportunity for which we're not maximizing? What are the different perspectives? What are the areas of convergence and divergence around this particular issue or problem? Can we try and get consensus halfway through the panel? Can we get some type of agreement, not total agreement, because that's what we're going to do in the next year. And if we've got some sort of agreement and alignment that this is a problem for which we need a solution, that is an awesome starting point. Because if you don't have that starting point, it's going to fall over. And then say, okay, what do we do about it? Let's have an initial discussion. Let's get some ideas about how we might solve this, capture it. And that goes into the report in a very structured way. But in doing so, if I'm facilitating that session, I am passing the baton on to Carol. And Carol picks up where that discussion leaves, but we're moving backwards in the ecosystem into the next stakeholder environment. So the first session will very likely be on policy. Government, what are the rules? What are the constraints in which we all have to work? The second talk might move into health system and demand side. So what are clinicians? And then we'll move into, well, what are industry perspectives? So we'll systematically go through each group. So the day one effectively is, what is the theory of change? What do we need to change? How are we building and understanding? And then day two is like, okay, given what we learned yesterday, how do we start to build, even conceptually, a new system architecture? How do we apply all of that thinking into, if we could start with a blank sheet of paper and we didn't have vested interests, what could a new connected life sciences system look like? And what would it involve? And what would the enabling platforms be needed? What type of incentives and rewards should be and where should they be to make it work? How do we move from a regulatory base to a value-based evidence generation strategy? What are the trip hazards? So it's just very high level conceiving that. And then that model will then be pulled apart, built up within the work that we'll do within Policy Futures. And maybe in 2027, that's where we start off. Well, what did we do? Have we collectively, conceptually recreated the model? And let's discuss it. That's the starting point for 2027. So there's lots of methodology, there's lots of structure, there's lots of vision that's gone into how we do our work so that we don't throw spaghetti at the wall. It's not a talking shop, and we actually do something meaningful. So I feel like I've just waffled again for 2 minutes, but I don't know what you think about that sort of architecture of trying to really approach it in a very systematic sort of academic way to get the content. And one of the things, and I'll stop after this, is people need to trust the outputs. The outputs need to be credible. They need to be evidence-based. We need to think very early on, if we're proposing an idea, a solution, or a response to policy, or an objection to policy, how do we make it credible? And one of the key things is that sort of defining the problem, co-creating the solution, getting the evidence will make the output more robust. Because we said in a previous discussion earlier today, and reflecting on some of our meetings with Andrew, is that it's very easy for him to put something in the bin because it's not robust, it's not credible, it hasn't been methodological, it doesn't have the evidence. We want our work to be empirical. We want it to have impact. We want it to be difficult for it to be ignored. But we want it to be useful. So it's easy for people to make the change that's required on the basis of the evidence.
I quite like the difficult to be ignored concept. One of the things that strikes me when you're talking, I have a feeling that we have been contemplating, big system. We've been thinking very end to end and backwards and forwards. You talk about, and so I have a feeling that we're going to come up with more things to do than we have time or resources to do it. So, for me, this choosing what we do and choosing it in a way that all of the stakeholders, all of the participants feel comfortable with is going to be key. So I don't know where.
And that's important for a democracy perspective as well. So the idea would be that we'll come up with this report, and this report will, just as you have both said, it will have more recommendations and more ideas than anybody could handle. What will then follow will be a prioritization exercise using open, transparent methods. And we've already discussed this, and our colleague Karen Facey, who everybody knows is very good at methods, and we suggested a Delphi panel, and I think she wanted to throw something at me, but we will come up with the right method to go from that very big list to a list of a few things that we'll put some criteria in place that could reasonably be achievable and be done within a certain time frame. And what that might mean is, and it has to be chronological and logical because some things build on other things, But there will be some things that will be difficult and complex. If we don't start now, we'll never deliver in year 4. And there'll be things that need to be done because future things can't be done, but they're less complex and could be achieved within the next 12 months. So we'll build that sort of matrix, that framework, to try and give us a really sensible and thoughtful and pragmatic list of things to do that are achievable, that are affordable, that are logical and deliverable. And the more momentum we get, the more strength and depth we get, hopefully the more funding we get, year on year that list might increase. But it's not about volume, it's about doing a few things well and getting stuff done.
Well, I think if you go into the summit with having thought about it, we anticipate that there are going to be 5 topics that we can move forward, say. That actually helps when you're facilitating to sort of be, well, you know, would this be on that list of 5 topics? Having kind of a knowledge of what the next step is going to be helps you to really kind of push people. Yeah. Is that your decision that this is the thing that you think needs to be dealt with, or is this a nice to have but it can wait and be done differently? You know, so I think you need to have had that thinking before the summit so that people are clear.
So this is right, and this is why it's that sort of managed democracy. It's about, yeah, we want to create an environment, but we don't want the discussions to drive the vision totally. We've got to have a sense of where do we want to be, what are the guardrails, what are the construct, what are the business practice and deliverability things that we need to have that we just backfill by the discussion. And it will shape each other. But at the end of the day, we need to know broadly where we're headed to steer and facilitate and get ourselves there in a business-like way. Otherwise, it will just be like everything else. It'll be a really great discussion. It was nice to see Carol and Jean. The canopies were awesome. I enjoyed the dinner at Edinburgh Castle. So what? It can't be like that.
The other thought that's just struck me is everybody does talk about inclusiveness, and of course it's absolutely the right thing to do, but it's a challenge, that inclusivity, not because you don't want to do it, but how to make it meaningful for everyone you've included. Because there are dynamics, aren't there? There are dynamics of knowledge, there's dynamics of power, there's dynamics of status, there's all of that sort of thing going on. And especially here in HTA, where you do have some very powerful forces playing into the policy development. I'm intrigued and wondering how I'm saying we, might be able to create an environment where that problem is minimised. I'm not sure it can be taken away completely, but it can be minimised.
It's a very good point. So I think we're not...
Maybe recognising it to start with might be a good...
Exactly. So we've put a list of invitees together, and we've been very thoughtful about it. And again, it goes back to that managed democracy and having a business-like approach. It's not a club we're trying to create. You know, it's people that are proportionally selected from the stakeholder groups that are mostly implicated, but they're at a level of seniority that they can go back to the stakeholder group from which they come and make changes. They've got decision-making authority or capability, or they're from senior management that can go back and have a reasonable discussion about saying, hey guys, if we just change the way we thought about how we did this, actually it would make a difference. Same with patient organisations and people hopefully from NICE or NHS England that will be that they have the ability to influence the stakeholder group from which they come on the basis of sensible, pragmatic discussion. We also have thought about not just getting like-minded people in there, right? Because that is no good either. You need all opinions. It's better to get them in and hear them than to have them on the outside. So there's a lot of people in there who I do not agree with, and they do not agree with me. But that is okay. We cannot put walls up. Come on in. Everybody's opinion is valid. And actually, if we discuss it and apply methods and have everybody feel comfortable, we might get closer together. We'll never be completely together, but get closer together sufficiently that we can make change happen. And I think we'll learn as we go, but I think the pressure's off a little bit because it's not a one and done. It is a starting point for what will be an institute, effectively, a destination, an environment in which that group and other people can continue the discussion, can fall out, make up, whatever it kind of might be, within certain guardrails, using methods, and doing the research, and then coming back again and picking it up. You know, I think that will give us a reasonable chance of doing something meaningful and overcoming some of the limitations and challenges of other things we've been involved in the past that have been well intended but have just not worked. So that's the plan for the summit. I could waffle on a little bit more about it, but I would make more of a fool of myself than I have already. But I think it's quite exciting. And again, we've stress tested it with a number of different people. And again, some people immediately get it and think, wow, this is different. I need to be there. Other people are processing, and other people look at you like you're some sort of alien, you know, and that's okay. It's absolutely okay. But I think it's super, super exciting. We've invested a lot of time and money in it, and we want to make sure that we give people, you know, without being irresponsible in terms of you know, spending money, but we want to create a slightly different environment, because we've all been to congresses where you are in an odd-shaped room with pillars, and you're on these really cheap conference chairs, all lined up like you're waiting on a bus, and it's an absolute nightmare. And you know, the screens are in the wrong place, and you can't see the panel. That's not what we want to create. We want to create an environment that's consistent with the vision, the brand, the energy, the courage that we have in HTA Policy Futures to bring things out of that too hard to fix box. And so we're going to hire in nice chairs. You know, they're going to be in a nice circle. You're going to have space to move your elbows and wiggle around a little bit. You're going to have a little table to put your coffee and your snacks on. There'll be yoga mats at the back where you can get up and stretch and breathe. We're investing a lot in creating an environment and a brand that's conducive to doing difficult things and to do hard things.
I think part of your introduction should be, we're going to place the chair sufficiently apart that sharp elbows.
Yeah. It's like, so you can, if you're going to throw something at someone, it's not going to reach.
That safe space.
You know, yeah. But to invest in the environment and to make it conducive to the type of thing that we want to achieve. And I think that's really important. And we've put on a social program as well, where we're having a welcome reception at the Johnny Walker Centre, which is a 2-minute walk from the hotel that looks over Edinburgh Castle. And you know, there's worse places to look than Edinburgh Castle at night. And there's been lots of very positive comments about whiskey. And then we'll have a dinner on the Friday night at Edinburgh Castle. And you know, so that social program I think is important as well, because we've got to have fun, and it's quite often in these social programs where some of the better discussions happen and you kind of resolve things, but it's where you build chemistry and friendship as well. And I think it's these relationships and friendships and that trust from different stakeholders that we can bring back into the room each year and through all the different programs and services that we offer that allows us to have the discussions that we need.
So you talk about having a speaker's corner. Are there any other kind of corners that you might want to have? So like a kiss and make up corner, or a, you know, something that's kind of not just a one piece.
I'd never be out of it.
But you see what I mean? So it's just sort of whether there are other things that you might want to do in that sort of smaller space.
Yeah. So with the ELC team, we thought a lot about this, and there's been lots of good ideas. And I think at the end of the day, we want to get the core bit right. Yeah. And we want to keep it simple, and we don't want too many gimmicks. Not that's what you're suggesting, but we came up with some kind of gimmicks. And we don't need to do everything on the first time, but we are thinking about it. So we are thinking about little informal breakout spaces that people can go.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it when it's like
chat.
you know, this corner will be about the QALY, and this corner will be about patient evidence. You know, you can do. I've
One
seen.
wouldn't be a corner. It'd be a whole floor of the hotel.
That would be generating heat. I think that would be in the basement creating the heat. But you know, those sorts of things. They've worked quite well in patient group meetings where it gives people who don't come together very often that opportunity to talk about a specific thing that's bothering them.
And it could well be that once there are two people in that corner, suddenly, they're having a chat about.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't, one of the things, again, you know, I was keen on in the discussion about Summit is as much influence over the structure of the programme as we can from the stakeholders. I think you've already done, you've talked to many people, so I'm absolutely confident you've done that. But one of the things you could do, since you are going to do a little bit of outreach pre-conference, is maybe have a list of these things and just ask people what would be their first choice for these, whatever you want to call them, not quite fringe,
so these
fringe
are all,
events.
all great ideas, and myself and colleagues Jonathan and Steph and that's we're not, no one's poo-pooing them. But what we want to do...
I know you do have to have some structure to the meeting.
It's about structure, but it's also about that one of the things that is irritating is sidebar discussions.
Oh yeah.
And we said it earlier on about, I think you said it, Jean, it might have been off camera, right enough. It's about giving an example of some work you've done before, whereas, you know, walking into the room, you're going to say, God, I'm going to do. And then when you're in the room, you say something completely different. And this has hindered us moving forward. I've been to so many advisory boards where, you know, we've been in there with clinicians and sort of patients, and the company says, and you tell them what they think they want to hear. And then you walk to the tube station at Regent's Park afterwards and something completely different. It's like, this is not fair, it's not right. So it's getting that balance right between allowing these discussions, not allowing, but enabling these discussions to happen for all the good reasons, but making sure that we all hear about it.
We come back.
We come back, and there's nothing that's done over there that's not said here, because we want the opposite. We want everybody effectively round the same table, warts and all.
Yeah, so maybe a way to do it is, you know, if you're having lunch, I don't know if it's going to be a buffet or there are going to be tables, you know, you can have a table that's on these different things so that then people can move around and be part of those discussions.
And bring it back.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, I think there's nothing more irritating than people kind of, we solved that in the coffee break.
Yeah, and listen, we're not trying to control free speech, we're trying to dictate what happens, but it's just about how we do it well and how we make sure that we hear everything we need to hear. Because if we don't hear it, we can't solve it. And we don't want to say it's okay to go over there and mouth off about pharma or mouth off about NICE. It's not helpful. Bring it back.
Well, I think
be up front and be honest.
Yeah, I think that calls for sort of, you know, here's how we expect the meeting to run. We expect you to be transparent in your conversation, but we expect you to contribute to the sort of discussion rather than having I mean, I don't know how you'd construct it, but something like that, which kind of not rules, but, you know, here's what we're expecting from the meeting. Something that's encouraging people to do the right thing.
Yeah.
I think for me, and it's again something you said earlier about a movement. This is a movement, and it's finding ways to make people genuinely feel that they are part of that, even though it's a conference, it's a summit, and that's the hard thing to pull off, isn't it? When you've got when you've got quite a number of people, it's all right if you've got maybe 6 or 7 people around a table, but 80 people.
If you look at things like St Gallen, so St Gallen breast cancer meeting, St Gallen is something that the people in the sort of breast cancer medical oncology community expect to go to, and it's held every 2 years, and that is a movement. You know, the idea is you go, you keep things moving, you change kind of protocols, etc., and that's what you will achieve by the Edinburgh Summit.
And I think if we get the right people in the room and we do our jobs properly. And, you know, it's about inspiring people as well. I think if you inspire people, because you can't motivate people, we've all wasted a ton of time trying to motivate people. If you're not going to motivate yourself, there's not much I can do about it, but you can inspire people. You can...
That's your vision. See, back to your vision.
Yeah.
Vision is inspiration.
And if they're all going to be brilliantly smart people, and they'll work it out, and they will know whether or not what we come out with is worth it. And hopefully it will be, and they will commit their intellectual horsepower and their time to do it. And if we succeed, it drives further work. So it's not guaranteed, but it's possible to get 80 people aligned and inspired enough to work together for more than 5 minutes to make change happen. And if we have some good coffee, have some time at the whiskey place.
You have the coffee shipped in from Haddington, are you?
I can predict the menu. It'll be chicken balmoral, which is, the haggis and the whiskey.
Yes.
So, if we get that bit right, and we're respectful of people, and we're humble, and show gratitude and respect their opinions, they'll hopefully come on the journey with us. So, okay, so that's the summit. I think to save what little reputation I have for anything sensible and waffling, we'll stop there. But thank you, Jean, thank you, Carol, and hopefully we'll see you again at HTA Talks session. Hopefully this is the first of many, and will involve many, many more people, and there'll be better people than me to kind of do the discussion. And thank you for all your wisdom, your help, support, holding the mirror up, challenge thus far. And super excited about launch, which will be soon. And beyond excited about the summit. Slightly scared, but being scared a little bit is good. And yeah, fingers crossed it works. So thank you.